Eugene, Springfield, Lane County, Oregon. Support our work. Make a donation at STRPOD.com. Thank you for listening to Spent the Rent Podcast. And now, here's your host, Patty Rose.
Hello, I am Patty Rose. Welcome to the Spent the Rent Podcast. My guest today is Ericka Thessen, who is running to keep her seat on the 4J School Board in Eugene, Oregon. She was appointed in 2023. Ericka brings years of experience as a physical therapist, a mother of three, and a longtime volunteer in many ways at 4J schools. She served at site councils at McCormick, Kennedy, and Churchill, and was on the 4J Budget Committee from 2021 to 2023. She is focused on equity, student mental health, and making sure families and educators are heard. So we are very happy to have you on. We've been friends a little bit on Facebook for about a few years. Thank you so much, and it's great to have you. Thank you.
Oh, thanks. I'm really glad to be here. It's good to see you.
Yeah, and we're doing this pretty quick because the election is happening very soon. So we kind of had to throw this together. So the election is it May 20th? Is Tuesday. So the ballots should be sitting on your kitchen table, and you can fill them out and drop them off in any local ballot box. And you have until 8 p.m. on May 20th, and that is Tuesday. And then you do not have to postmark it if you want to mail it. You can just drop it in the mailbox. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Cool. So let's just get started with talking about you were appointed to the school board. What made you want to join the school board? What made you want to represent your community?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, a couple of things. One of them is, I have three kids, and, one of my kids has had, a lot of mental health struggles and is LGBTQ, and just watching them really struggling in the school environment, middle and high school, and trying to get supports in place. And it just was such an uphill battle. Even though the staff were great, it was still an uphill battle to get supports. And then, my youngest, who's completely amazing, has a history of developmental delay. She's autistic. And same thing, even though she had been getting, OT, PT, and speech from the time she was 9 months on, it was still really hard to get her supports in the school system. And she was really struggling. And it was, essentially end of fifth grade, beginning of sixth grade before we could even get a 504 plan and any kind of supports in place. And I kept thinking, like, gosh, if it's so hard for me to just get some of these things in place, what's it like for other parents who are working 2 or 3 jobs, or there's a language barrier? So that was part of what I wanted to be there. The other part of it is I've worked in healthcare for a long time, like hospital level healthcare. And I feel like healthcare and education share a couple of things in common. And it's decades of disinvestment, constantly short-staffed, and the staff are constantly burned out. And so I felt like what I lived every day in my job at the hospital and what these teachers and EAs and staff are going through, it's like, even though I'm not a teacher, I get it. You're in the trenches being asked to do things. Like at the hospital, we're being asked to do things that have nothing to do with healthcare. And in schools, teachers are being asked to provide supports.
And it's all interlinked. So it's good that you have expertise. And we want representation from different areas on every board so that we get all kinds of different voices. So talk about, you were appointed in 2023. Talk about what kind of, so for anybody that just doesn't even know what the duties of a board member would be, can you explain what it is to be a 4J school board member? I mean, representing the schools in the area.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because what I thought a school board member does and what we actually do are often two different things. And it's hard for the public. The day-to-day decisions of the district are not made by the school board. Basically, the school board's primary responsibilities is to hire, fire, and evaluate the superintendent. That's the only employee that the school board has, is a superintendent. We press broad policies, and we pass a budget. Those are our 3 big things. So a lot of times people will come really passionately and give us testimony, in public comment at our public meetings. And a lot of times it's stuff that's not even in our jurisdiction.
Right. I mean, yeah. It's important to be, for people to feel heard, but we got to make sure that people understand where to go, kind of thing, with that kind of stuff. So I mean, you want to talk about the budget a little bit. There's obviously everywhere we look, there's going to be cuts coming from, the federal level, and already, because the budget was already tight. So you can talk about that. Working on the budget committee, what would you like to talk about with that?
Yeah, I mean, we're lucky, other school districts were already having to cut budgets 1, 2, 3 years ago. 4J, for better or for worse, depends on which side you're on, has had a huge budget reserves. And so because of that, we didn't have to do any cuts until this year. And boy, howdy. I mean, even before the Trump administration, there were cuts in title funding, which helps fund programs for low income students. But I mean, we were basically looking at needing to cut somewhere between $15 and $30 million just this year. And, at the moment, what the budget committee, recommended to us and what the board is looking at is probably about $15.6 million in cuts. But full and well knowing we're going to have to make more cuts next year. And then, we were sort of waiting on the state economic forecast. We're in a long session of a 2-year biennium with the state legislature, and we were really hoping there would be more money in there. Found out Wednesday that the state basically has about $756 million less to work with in the biennium. And so
Wow.
we were hoping on a couple of things. Like, one of them is there's a cap on special education funding. So they will basically pay school districts up to 11%, to say 11% of your students are in special education. We're beyond that. We're somewhere between 15 and 16%. We were hoping they were going to raise that cap so they would fund schools that have more special education students. Probably not going to happen. We won't know until the end of the session. And then also we were hoping for higher reimbursement when we have students that have, that are medically fragile students that have high needs, where a student needs an EA with them the whole day. To meet their medical needs. I don't think either of those things are going to happen. So, and then, this budget that the governor put out comes with an accountability measure, which basically, if the school districts aren't getting kids reading by 3rd grade, graduating in 4, or completing high school in 5, they're going to start telling the school districts, they're going to start taking over and tell those school districts how to spend their money. And the choices will not, they'll be outside of the school district. So it's hard. We're looking at huge cuts, and we got a new superintendent coming in July, new permanent superintendent. And yeah, I mean, I feel bad. She's already coming in where we're making cuts, and she already knows, I met with her on Monday, that we have to cut more next year, and it's not going to be pretty, because basically we'll be spending most of our reserves.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know. I mean, and I think that that's going to be everywhere you turn, like in forestry and in firefighting and in, and so we'll have a lot of episodes of the podcast, I guess, and things to talk about and remind people of how things work a little bit. I mean, I don't know. So I don't know how to ask this question, and I just will kind of give you a chance to talk a little bit about your personal experience, if you'd like to share about what it is, what you've dealt with. I mean, I think it's really cool just getting to know you and hearing you talk about these things. I can tell that you come at this from different angles, and that it's when you go through these experiences of challenges, I'll just put it that way, in life, I don't care what it is. Everybody has a story in some way.
Yeah.
So when there's equity concerns for people, and explain what equity is, first of all. Let's do that, because I love it, because that's one of the things that I'm not willing to somebody that may disagree with me on this, but there's a lot of talk right now, like we need to backpedal on certain things like DEI, and equity is a part of that, and I'm not really willing to backpedal on it. So let's talk about what it is to you and the kind of work that you've done with that kind of work.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I'll give you just like a global answer, and then I'll tell you a little bit more. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm supposed to be serving all the students and staff in the district, right? Absolutely. But at the same time, there's certain people in our district, students, staff, and families, that are experiencing more problems and having more harm. So like those students that are more marginalized, more vulnerable, those are the kids, and the staff and the families that we need to raise up and try to help support them as much as possible. I mean, for me, the kid's dad left, I think 14 years ago. So I, instantly, like kind of overnight without much warning, became a single mom of 3 kids. And at the time they were all under 8, ended up, we lost our house, bankruptcy, like whole 9 yards, and I had to like really get awful humble, even though I have a good job. I'm a physical therapist. I get paid pretty good, but like, boom, suddenly I had to 100% pay for childcare and all these things. And, I had to learn to really get humble, things like my daughter wanted ballet lessons. I couldn't afford ballet lessons. So, you call the dance studio and say, hey, can we work out something? Yeah, if you wash our windows and our mirrors every week, she can have free classes, or like I wanted to exercise at bar 3, which is wicked expensive. So like I did their laundry 3 days a week so that I could be able to exercise. My son was in Churchill Babe Ruth, how am I going to be able to afford the $250 bat and the $200 glove, and talking to other parents about, like, can I have your kids'
Yeah.
hand-me-downs? So like I had to get real humble real fast. And then, between my job where a lot of my patients, like a lot of people coming in the hospital are like, it's not that they're living on the edge. They already have a foot over the edge. I mean, and a lot of them are unhoused. They have substance abuse issues. I cannot tell you the number of patients I have that are seniors who do live in a house but don't have power or water because they can't afford it because their meds are too expensive. And these are people that like had jobs with pensions once upon a time. So
Right.
I think that really taught me a lot. Some of my first volunteering that I did a lot of stuff with Planned Parenthood, but I volunteered with CORE when CORE first started out. Scrappy organization working with unhoused youth from like ages 14 to 24, and we would do street feed. And we would go out there, we'd cook food, and we'd hand it out. We'd hand out Narcan, and being able to see these kids, like our most vulnerable young people in the community, and that like a lot of them go to our schools. Like, I live in Churchill region, and it's like we have one of the highest rates of couch surfing and unhoused students in the 4J school district. And I really wanted to be able to bring some of that perspective to the table too, because I think sometimes like unhoused students, disabled students, like I think we sort of gloss over them, and we can't, because
Yeah.
and a lot of like the unhoused kids are regularly kids with mental health struggles, or they're
Sure.
LGBTQ, so it's
Well, and
like
I mean,
all that.
I did you grow up in Eugene? Did you go to high schools in
No.
Eugene? See, I grew up here. I went to high school. I graduated in 2000, right? And so I graduated from South Eugene.
Oh
So
yeah.
I understand the struggles of those streets. Like when you're a teenage kid, and I had a place to go, but it wasn't that necessarily that I would always feel safe or want to be there. Not, you got what I mean. It was just
Yeah.
not where I wanted to be. So I have so much respect for CORE, and I do think that's how we crossed paths for the first time, because
Yeah.
CORE was, I've always been into punk rock. Actually, this summer I'm going to Denver, going to a punk rock festival with a buddy Mario, but
So cool.
they kind of do it in a different way, and I really think that that's super important. But let's get back and talk about equity, and I think you kind of have, but how do you see ways that it actually really works where
Yeah.
I guess let's talk about the budget and how it affects that. How are you seeing now a lot, a gap between the needs of certain people in a school, because of that? What does that look like?
Yeah, that's really hard. When we were looking at the budget cuts, so the superintendent gave us like a proposed budget, and a lot of what we were cutting were EAs, like support positions. Some of them were like bilingual EAs at the high school level and different things. And it's like the school district started a couple of years ago doing an inclusion model so that a majority of disabled students are in classes with everybody else. They're not in a standalone classroom, which is great, right? That's what we need. Disabled kids deserve to be everywhere in any class and activity they want to be. But at the same time, you also have staff and families saying, yeah, but they're not quite getting the supports that they need. So it's
Yeah.
like, we're doing this thing like, look, we're doing equity, but then it's like, but we're also not staffing it the way that it meaningfully needs to be. I know this year there were some positions looking to get cut in like the unified PE classes and like the unified sports. I don't know if you know about this, but like unified sports, holy cow, coolest thing ever. You've got disabled students and non-disabled students, and like the non-disabled students help the disabled students to be able to do stuff. So like they help them in basketball, so like they'll push the wheelchair down the court and then then the student gets to shoot the basket from there. Just really cool things where like
Sure.
the
And
non-disabled students learn a lot. But yeah, so it's like we're looking at cuts in that, and we kept saying, oh, we're going to use this budget values framework, and we're going to make
you're
sure that we're not cutting.
I mean, and
but
those are events. Those are like a couple times a year. You know what I mean? And so
Yeah.
it's the point is that there's not tons of money being funneled into that. It's a couple
No.
events that are great for people's self-esteem, for feeling like they're seen and heard, and and all that kind of stuff. I mean, I
Yeah.
remember when we did, the school 8th grade versus teachers basketball
Oh, yeah.
game, and it's insane. It's just so awesome, and those things are
Yeah.
memories that people have for a lifetime. So I get what you mean. So I mean, now one of the things I want to I want to give a shout out just when we talk about this kind of stuff to my buddy Nels. Nels was a part of starting Educational Equity Now, which is a good
Yeah.
website. So everybody should look that up. And if when you get on the board, I'm going to connect you guys or you're already
Oh,
working on the
good.
board, but connect you guys with Nels, because the work that he's doing with them is so awesome, because he's just trying to make equity is basically making sure that everybody feels like they're getting a fair shake, because
Mhm.
certain people just need a couple tools that other people might not even really think that they need. And so
Yeah.
can you explain what a couple of those might be? Like, I know that sometimes there's families that don't have internet, and so schools are trying to put internet at it's basically so that they can drive there, and then they
Mhm.
can use hotspots. And
Yeah.
talk about those kind of programs that you've seen in the last couple of years with Eugene,
Yeah.
and I know that those will probably be cut, but talk about how that works.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things is like the family resource coordinators. So we had them at 4 of our lowest income elementary schools, and they're based in the school. And so basically their role was to, connect with students and families, but also to have like teachers and the principal and stuff be like, hey, like this mom over here can't pay the electric bill. And then like the family resource coordinator would work on what are some resources, can we help get at least 1 month paid for you. They were helping kids with shoes, food boxes, that kind of stuff. But again, that was title funding that funded it. That got cut. That has, like, even before the Trump administration came in, it essentially got cut. So the budget looks at cutting those because we won't have, like, we literally don't have title funding. They're looking at moving it downtown so that there'll be a couple people doing it, but for the whole district, not just for those 4 schools. But basically, teachers and families and stuff are going to have to reach out and say, hey, we need help. But they do a ton of coordination with different groups like 15th Night and OSLC and different things, to be able to, or like McKinney-Vento, where they're working on getting clothes and shoes and food boxes and those types of things. So that's great. But it's hard. What happens if you don't have a car? And it's hard enough for you to get your kids to and from school. You go walk to the bus stop to get them. Now you got to go drive downtown Eugene to find this resource coordinator to get your stuff. So that part kind of is a bummer. I mean, one of the things that we're doing in the district that we've done for a couple of years now, and it's pretty amazing, and it is getting stronger, are affinity groups. So like the Black Student Union, the Latine Student Union, the AAPSI Student Union. Oh my gosh, we have so many. I'm missing. We have like the Mind Body one, which is for neurodiverse kids. We have one for LGBTQ, the GSA. I'm definitely missing some, but
Right.
those are huge. And we have them in the high schools. We have them in almost all the middle schools, and they are starting in some of the elementary schools. But creating that space where these people can connect, feel safe, be able to talk about what's important to them, what's not working, So those are great, and I'm glad that we're doing it. And so far, that's not getting cut. So
Yeah.
that part I really, really, really love. I mean, we have an equity committee. They were kind of not doing a lot for a couple of years. They're getting back together, but the work is so slow. Like, I can't get
Yeah.
over how slow. Something else that we are doing is we have like basically for students with disabilities, we have like a parent group, and we have like a student group, and they meet at least once a month. And then like the neurodiversity group, it's amazing. They put on events every month to teach about how do you fight for your kids IEP 504, or like this month it was like how to deal with your kids and online stuff, like how do you let your
Yeah.
kids be kids but also keep them
Sure.
safe, but
Right.
also the whole they have neurodiversity and how do you support them that way. So it's great. I mean, there are good things happening in the district, but tight
Yeah.
money and
It
things
takes
getting
it takes
cut.
a village. I mean, and I see we've been friends on Facebook, and I've watched you get more and more involved. And I know that it's about stamina, because it's about how much you have the energy to be included in these kind of things and just have your normal everyday life. I know So I just want to, you're running for you've been on the school board. You want to continue this. How many more years? 4 more years? I don't know.
Yeah,
And what does it really look like every week? I know that it's basically meetings on Mondays, and then you have like work sessions with the board and whatnot. And what do you see, getting done in the next couple years for Eugene School? You said new superintendent, so it's kind of time right now to kind of get things. I know that takes a while for things to get kind of a tenor going. So where do you see us in 3 years?
I see us definitely in a better place, despite not great circumstances. Like this school district has had a ton of upheaval in the board and the superintendency and some of the upper level management. And it shows. It has taken a toll. People are hurt. People are, they got trauma. There are people that are like, I don't know who to trust. Are you guys going to get your what together? But the past year and a half, the 7 of us on the board have really gelled. I mean, even if we don't agree with each other on things, we're not we're not ripping each other's throats out.
Sure.
We're working together. Colt Gill was our interim superintendent this year. This is great. He came out of retirement from ODE. He had retired from ODE, saw that we needed an interim, came in, held up his retirement for a year and came in and helped us, which was huge. And then we did a nationwide search for a new superintendent, and who we picked is amazing. Like Dr. Miriam Mickelson. She is like whip smart, hardworking, equity focused, and like she's going to be a transformational leader. I mean, this is a person who is, she's an immigrant. She moved here, she grew up in poverty in the Philippines, came here for college and really truly believes in public education. She was up in Cedar Woolley in Washington, had a rough time there. The school board that hired her, that adored her, that was working well with her, ended up somewhat replaced by some Moms for Liberty folks who did not really want Miriam to be their superintendent. So they amicably separated because it was a completely different board and they were going a different direction. So we're really lucky to have her. Like through the interview process, she just amazed me. She was in town this week meeting with all of us one-on-one, and like I cannot tell you how incredibly smart she is, but how incredibly warm and engaged and like genuine. You know how you meet some leaders and you're like, you are so fake. She's not. She is so genuine, and like she remembers stuff. Like she happened to meet my daughter at school yesterday and like texted me, I got to meet your daughter today. I mean, just like,
sure.
I don't know. She's just like super
just
amazing.
Truly engage and truly connect and have empathy, and you actually believe it, and because it's probably genuine in those people, and they step up because they really believe it, So, I mean, this is gonna be a tough question, but that really gets me thinking like about the hardest thing to ever ask anybody. And so, good luck. But in this time in the country, it feels like we're more divided maybe than ever, at least on our lifetimes. And so, what does it look like to try to bring people together, especially in public education? But I also want to add like that. Here we are, we're talking about two different perspectives, and I don't want to, make a devil's advocate or false equivalence or any of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But the reality is there's always going to be a ton of different perspectives. And so the idea for boards is so that people can be able to have different viewpoints. But when we talk about, you said, what was the group that is like a far right,
Moms for Liberty.
Right. And so groups like that, I don't know if we can really, how do I say this? Like sometimes lately I feel like I'm making arguments for them because I'm like, just their existence, like for people to be able to use their voice. As much as I completely disagree, I don't want to be like, you have no right. So we have to find compromise, and the only way we do that is by really trying to hear each other. So that's cool to know that the woman in Eugene, or that's taking over in Eugene, is is somebody with experience of having to deal with hostility on a board, unfortunately, because that experience now is needed, And what is most of your experience like though on the board? Is it usually like tame, or are people kind of, you said that it's not really that contentious. I mean, what kind of stuff have you really?
The 7 of us are not contentious. I mean, and we've made some major decisions and done so, like unanimously. Like our school board is the first and only public K-12 school system in the United States to sue the Trump administration. Like it was one of those things where we suddenly had a secret meeting. We didn't know what it was about. We got there. They were like, we have a chance to take part in this lawsuit with the AFT and the American Sociological Association. And, holy cow. And we had to make a decision that night. And we made it unanimously that we are going to stand up to the Trump administration, that how can you comply with the Dear Colleague letter when it goes in direct opposition of both the district's values, but more importantly, state statutes and laws.
Can you explain that? I mean, so that I'm not familiar with exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I mean, basically, the Trump administration came down with like these rules that, basically the Department of Education was going to check to see if all the school districts had gotten rid of all DEI. Which is hard because a lot of what they're asking is like, what does that mean? Do you have specific examples? But, we looked at our school district and realized things like the Grow Your Own program, where we take like, bus drivers or EAs and we help get them to become teachers, or, programs where we're trying to increase the number of teachers of color or teachers with disabilities. But like our affinity groups I was talking about earlier, and just like there's state laws, like we have to teach Indigenous history in the state of Oregon. We have to teach, genocide and Holocaust to students. Like all of these are state laws. So you can't do what the Trump administration is asking you and then also follow Oregon state statutes.
Right.
So, we stood up and said, no, we're going to take a stand against this. And, we did get a temporary injunction from the judge. I mean, it's like, who knows what will happen from here, but it was like we made a decision to stand up and say, no, we're going to take care of our kids and our teachers and make sure that our teachers can teach the way they need to. But yeah, I mean, there are some board meetings where things are hard. I mean, like there was we've had the amazing Eugene Gakuen, the Japanese immersion program, several years ago before I was on the board. Their building got demolished to build in the new north. They were promised, they were moved from this building and promised one thing. And now, a decision that the board didn't make, the superintendent did, but, we need to stand behind. They're going to be permanently housed in now the South Eugene region. This is really hard. Kids came at the last school board meeting, kids who've been in the North region their whole lives. They are students at North, and now they're being told to do the program. They're going to have to go to South. These kids were weeping. They don't want to leave their friends. They don't want to leave like the teams that they're on or the programs they're in, so stuff like that. Some of the meetings
are pretty difficult.
Yeah. Rough.
Well, but, thank you for stepping up then. I mean, thank you for doing, putting the work in and representing the community. And I mean, I know that there's just many areas that you've done work and in the community. So I appreciate that too. And I mean, there's so much to talk about. But I want to talk about the division. Have you seen, or what are some ways that we're working on trying to make sure that people feel heard, at meetings? Because here's the deal. It's like, I'm sure you agree. We want to make sure that there's people that are being heard. So how can we improve communication at the schools, that kind of stuff with parents? I mean, how do you feel right now about the system of communication between parents and the school? Like, do you think
it needs to be better? I mean, they have, they use the online system that they use to like check their students' grade. They get through stuff through Canvas. There's usually emails, and different things like that. But still, it's got to be better. And I know some parents have come to some board meetings and they're like, "Hey, your board meeting recordings are supposed to be up on the website within so many days. Sometimes they're not. How are we supposed to know what happened in the meetings?" Which is like completely valid. And then some people say the website is hard to find stuff on. How do we sign up to testify at the school board meeting? So like all of that's got to be better. This year we started a community engagement like subcommittee, and basically what we ended up doing is board members met in small groups, throughout the community. Like I met with unhoused students through 15th night. One of the board members met with bereaved parents who have lost students in the district for, at any age for a variety of reasons. So that was great. We got a lot of information, that we were then just able to pass on to the superintendent and the chief of staff and be like, here's what the community is telling us. The committee is going to continue doing its work. I feel like we need to be having town halls. Like we need to be having town halls in different regions, and we need to be finding more ways to connect. I know somebody had recently asked, like, why do the board members not have like a blog. Like, how do we know what you guys are doing other than the meetings? And it's like, that's true. I mean, if I get invited to an elementary school to see something they're doing, who would know that other than the people in the elementary
Right.
school? Like, what are you guys doing? So I think that we need to improve the communication, and that's definitely like a huge goal for us in this next year, improving that and transparency. And like, I feel like some schools do a better job. Like, my kids all went to Churchill High School. Like, you got a huge newsletter weekly, and then you got texted throughout the week. So like, I felt like I knew what was going on there pretty good, but it sounds like it varies from school to school.
Sure.
And then, sometimes stuff happens, like say they have a security lockdown at a school. 90% of the time I hear it from my kids before I get the text message, an hour later from the district, like,
Right.
oh, there was an incident, everybody's safe. But still, you're getting texted from your kids.
Sure.
I'm going like, oh my gosh, what's going on? So I think the communication is something that needs to get better. But, and you talk about healing divisions, like at the end of the day, it like boils down to one or two things. Like, we can all disagree on a lot of stuff, but we need to be taking care of kids. We need to
Yeah.
be educating and caring for kids. And we have to be able to create a workplace where our employees are paid well, they have kick-ass benefits, and they know that they're valued. And so like at the end of the day, we can fight about all sorts of stuff, but can we get it back to the kids and the people that are taking care of them, And I think that's important. And I know sometimes we've had parents come to meetings and they've gotten mad and they've given testimony. And I finally realized now after a year and a half, a lot of times what it is fear. Like, the parent is just, they don't understand something, or they're scared, or it does not align with their worldview, and they're just scared. And if I can just sit there and realize that, like, most of the time they're coming at it from like, I love my kid, I'm freaked out, and try to not get in the weeds about what they're saying sometimes. I
Sure.
think
Well,
if I can just be like,
we have to hear each other's frustrations. We
yeah,
have to hear that, because we share the frustrations. We want to make sure that our kids are safe. We want to make sure, and it's something that I can't believe we've gotten 31 minutes and we haven't talked about school violence, but and that's good. That's but because I don't know, we're coming up on summer, but but
yeah,
when I was in high school, was May 21st, 1998 was the Thurston High School shooting. And then, I've got a couple stepsons, so I came into the picture late, and they were early high school years and middle school. And so every night we would talk about school violence during that time. That would have been about 8 years ago. And
yeah,
it's an epidemic that we do nothing about. We see nothing change, but there is a lot of good that happens. There's a lot of systems in place, and I want to give a shout out to the things that do work, because I think sometimes a lot of time people want to focus on what's not working, or those
yeah,
kind of things. But you and I both know that in Eugene, sometimes there is good situations. Like, I remember at Churchill, there was like a SWAT team guy or something like that. And I could be getting some of this wrong, but it was quite a few years ago. And he was dropping his daughter off at school, and she forgot her bag. So he ran, he like got out of the car and ran, and he was in fatigues with a gun.
yeah,
And so they shut the school down. My point is that
yeah,
they take it serious,
yeah.
and I think that's really good. So what are some areas that you'd like to see improved, with safety? And then we'll get out of here soon. But
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that, like, because of some bond money, we were able to, like, I hate when they call it this, but like harden like the outsides of the schools. Now like it's virtually impossible to get on campus and to get into the office. You got to look at somebody, they got to, badge you in, ask you why you're there. So like there's been that kind of stuff where it's definitely more secure than it's used to be. On all of the laptops and all of the computers, there's like a place to report like bias incidents, but also if you have concerns like, hey, I think a kid brought a weapon to school, like it's downloaded on everything. There's easy ways to do it. But I think what's lacking, I'll use an example. One of my students at their school, a student basically posted a picture on social media from inside the school that day with a weapon. Um,
wow,
Mercifully, the student ended up leaving campus, and then,
sure,
was interceded later by law enforcement, and, nobody was hurt. But it was interesting because talking to my kid and, hearing from some of the classmates, like they had concerns about the student for a long time. but didn't tell anybody because they were worried that the student may, could do something. And it's like, I don't know how we get kids over that. And it's not just kids, it's adults too. Like say
Yeah,
you're at
this
work
whole
and
community. Yeah,
there's a bully at work who's making your work life hell. And I didn't want to tell anybody because I didn't want this person to retaliate. And it's like, but I don't know how we get over that. But the kids do get in their advisory class several times throughout the year talking about, if you see something, you got to say something, guys. Like we got to take care of one another. It's all about community. But I think teaching kids to be upstanders is awful hard because a lot of times the adults can't be upstanders. Like Autumn and I were driving home today and happened to watch like three adult men and two pit bulls in what looked like, I was like, oh my God, we need to call 911. It was scary, and I was like, holy cow. But it's like, how many people drove by that and did not think like we should probably do something to
yeah.
make sure
But I mean,
everybody's okay?
at the same time, I don't know if I recommend that you do. Like sometimes get
Right?
involved. I mean, because why? I mean, your whole entire life can be changed in an instant. And
Hmm.
and there's so many. I don't know what social responsibility is. The reality is, it's not up for me to decide what
Yeah.
somebody else is. If somebody, like, if you have to step in,
Yeah.
in those situations, that's tough.
I know. That's what I,
If you're driving by, because you got to keep your. I mean, at this, I don't know. I don't know what your responsibility is as a
yeah.
citizen.
I know it was funny. I actually was telling, her as we were driving home, like I would pull over, but one of us could get bit by a dog. The people there could have weapons. We just need to call
Sure,
somebody and the professionals need to, go.
sure.
But I mean, who knows? What if I called 911 and one of those guys has a warrant out for his arrest and now he's getting arrested?
And that
I
was
don't
not the
know.
goal. Yeah,
That was it, right.
it's
Yeah,
interesting
so it's
where. Yeah,
like,
that's cool.
uh,
I know what you
but
mean. So
yeah,
yeah,
it's hard.
Eugene is in a lot of trouble, and because of
Yeah.
the budget cuts and the way that
Yes.
we're gonna have to figure out, we're gonna have to find leaders that are gonna promote small business growth and to build and foster local economy, because we have to have places that people want to go hang out and spend money and keep it locally, so that we can actually use those dollars that are generated locally to continue to use our voices. But I want to make sure that we're not, just doing stuff where we're chasing our tail too. So we need to be smart and
Right.
sensible and make sure that we're you know, making sure that people have a place to be, to feel like we can meet them at,
Yeah.
in the school setting. I don't know anything about what it would like. I barely went to school, and my education is so limited. I went to cosmetology school right out of high school, and so I really believe in trades and opportunities,
Yeah.
alternative opportunities for people. And so I do believe that people can get a great education, and that's a great route
Yeah.
for certain people. But I believe in a lot of choices and options, and
Yeah, I
so
gotta
hopefully,
tell you, I gotta nerd out for you for a second.
yes,
Last
please
night was
do.
the CTE showcase that had almost all of the CTE programs in 4J represented. I was there for the full 2 hours. I was so engaged. Like we have a forestry program at Sheldon. They have like an entrepreneurship program at Sheldon. We have the Future Build program where literally these students are building tiny houses for unhoused people, and then they also build like a stick-built house every year. Um, we've got the Humanitech program at South Eugene High School where like they're literally working with young kids who have disabilities to help modify toys, but like also being able to like modify a power wheelchair so it looks like a Jeep. And like one of the kids, like literally, because he can't push his own wheelchair, so he needs a power drive wheelchair. They're thousand. I mean, I know most of the time a power drive wheelchair costs more than a car. So being able to modify like kids like little tiny Jeeps and make it into something appropriate for a kid who has a disability. And like one of the kids' ones is going to have a bubble blower on it because that was a specific request. Like, oh my gosh, I can't even tell you. Like we have the Kelsey program, which is like a creative like design program. Those students all have made murals. Like they've done these projects, these huge murals that are going to go up at the Opportunity Village, where their new health center is going to be. I'm like totally missed. We've got culinary programs at South and at Sheldon. Churchill has got like a graphic design program. They also have a health careers program. I mean, it's just crazy. But like
Right.
Rachel Carson program, which is like an environmental science. But like literally last night, the kids from the Future Build program were like making planter boxes that then they raffled off. I mean, it just like, and these kids will tell you, I hated school before. And I didn't understand, why do you make me learn this dumb stuff? When am I ever going to use this again? And then they get into a CTE program when they're like, oh, I'm literally building a house, and that's why I need to know this math and I need to know these types of things. And it's like these kids are finally engaged. I went to the Kelsey program and they were working. I mean, they literally, these kids get hired by businesses in our community to build websites, to make emails, to make flyers and like logos and stuff for them. And they were working with a local dog rescue. And I just happened to be somebody who volunteers for dog rescue. So they asked me all about fostering and what happens when dogs, get sick and what does that look like. But one of the kids said it was the first time in her high school experience that education was humane. And I was like, holy crap, how do we make
Wow.
this bigger? Like,
Yeah.
like, and I keep saying, like, I want there to be a plumbing program. I want there to be an electrician program. I want there to be like a auto repair, auto body program.
Right.
Like,
I just believe in options, and I believe that if we
yeah,
can train our community, we're gonna all benefit. Not
yeah,
train, but like give people skills so that they can actually take pride in their work, and
yeah,
everybody is benefits from it. And so in order to do that, we have to make sure that it's viable, because obviously it
yeah,
can't be so expensive to start a business that it only works for big corporations, and that's what we deal
yeah,
with. It's a vicious
yeah,
cycle. So I struggled in high school at Springfield High, and I was able to transfer. And so I don't know who makes those decisions. I'm sure that the board, you would sit in and sometimes have to sit in circumstances that involves individual kids' personal situations. For me, it was just that I saw my direction was aimless at Springfield
mm,
High, and it might not be for the school itself. It just did not fit me. They were treating me like a
yeah,
criminal from the gate, and if I was a criminal is not important, because I was a kid that had his own
right,
business that
yeah,
had nothing to do with the school. And so that's
yeah,
the difficult balance, because I kept it away from the school, my criminality, because I used to rob banks when I was a 14-year-old. No,
yeah,
I never did. No, no. My point is that I was a troubled normal kid, and
yeah,
so I struggled, and I was not liking where it was heading at Springfield High, the way that they would treat me like a criminal. And so
yeah,
I wanted a fresh start, and I asked to transfer, and I got super lucky, and I transferred to South Eugene, and it really changed my life, because I felt like I was treated like I had choices on how things could go. Like, it was clear that it was like, here, dude, we're going to be honest with you. You'll get partial credit if you do this, but that's going to be fine. It's not like we're going to give you a pat on the back. You're still doing less, but
yeah,
you can choose that. And what that did for me was it made me feel appreciated enough to have autonomy. And so,
yeah,
because they were like, let's meet you where you're at. And so I slowly kind of started buying into the structure of school, because I had somebody I trusted. And
yeah,
before that, it was directed at me and it felt like punishment, and
mhm,
I was not for it. So I don't know
yeah,
where my question is in that, but that every kid struggles with different ways of dealing with authority, dealing with actually caring about the curriculum, believing some of the stuff that's probably being taught. Well, not that it's not true, but because of the fact that there's only so much you can say in a public school setting, because there's
yeah,
so many diverse ways of looking at things. It's a challenge to make sure that we're making sure everything is represented well. So talk about that a
yeah,
little bit. Yeah, whatever. I mean, I don't know.
yeah. I mean, I have to say, like, I think we're realizing this model of like a teacher is this knowledgeable person and he's going to regurgitate this information and you must be grateful to receive it. That's nonsense. It should be a partnership. I mean, even in kindergarten or first grade, this should be a two-way street. It should be a partnership where the kids don't feel like they're just being talked at, that they're being engaged with,
Right.
and there has to be choices in that. I mean, and I feel like our school district, like they just started doing something new this year. When I heard about it because I literally got a thing in the mail for my kid, and I show up at the board meeting and I'm like, "This is great," and they're like, "Wait, what are you even talking about?" But like, we're starting to do extended day high school. So say you're a kid that like, I don't know, your freshman year, your sophomore year, terror, like things were bad, you couldn't engage, you're missing school. Maybe you were sick, maybe you were
I had
had a
night school. I had to do night school.
right,
I did it. Yeah, I
yeah,
had to,
and
because
so
my
it's like,
grades were so bad my freshman year. That's the point. I was not focused.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so like
So
now we're doing that at a couple of the high schools and it's like, huge because now the kids are going to graduate on time. And like the way that the extended day high school is going, like it's a totally different model of education. And these kids are like, yeah, what do we do about kids who miss school because you have an eating disorder and you got sent off to treatment for 2 months? What
Sure.
happens when the kid has a lapse in school because of like some sort of incarceration and they come back? They deserve to be educated. We need to engage them and we need to meet them where they're at, and ask them what it should look like. Like, what do you want your education to look like? We have an alternative education high school, Echo. It's been around for, quite a while. It used to be at LCC. Now it's behind the district office. We've got, basically sophomores to seniors at Echo. And like, same thing. It's a small school, totally different educational model. And we also have like the GED program and things like that. And it's like, we're meeting kids where they're at. Cause there's some kids that say like, I just can't do that. Like this going to this high school in my neighborhood is not working for me. And it's like, we gotta listen to these kids. And they're telling you years before that, right? They're in middle school and they're already telling you this is not working for me. And it's like, I think we need to do a better job of like identifying those kids and listening to them. We just don't do as good of a job as we should. But I mean, and that's a big thing. I can't tell you how many kids talk about that feeling of being treated like a criminal. These are kids. They're literally kids.
That's literally how it's always been. I mean, I grew up, I don't know what came first, like me listening to Pink Floyd and watching The Wall and thinking that was my reality, or my reality being like looking like that and thinking like, we're just having to like file into these rooms and being treated like cattle. And I hated it. I hated high school. And I found ways to like it because, I mean, obviously I was going through a ton of trauma or whatever the hell every single human being goes through, and so it's just tough. But I like when you say we got to meet people where they are, because that's the goal. I mean, that's what equity is. It's make sure that people, I've seen different pictures that make sense where there's, say you're looking through a fence, right? And so there's 3 people and one person can see over the fence because maybe we'll just say they're tall enough. One person's not tall enough, so they need a stool to stand on. That's what equity is. Make sure that everybody can see over the fence. So I like when that happens, and I know that you put in a lot of work to represent Eugene in that way. I also want to say to the people that may disagree with some of the political stances that I have or you have, you and I won't always agree. Nobody should have to always agree. We need to make sure that we're communicating with each other. So please just make an effort to listen to each other. And I'm not saying this directed at you. I'm saying all of us. You know what I mean? That we need to make sure that we try to listen to each other, and so that we can listen. Like you said, sometimes you have to bypass the concern or what's being said and try to find the frustration and try to find why people are frustrated and what we can do about maybe listening to that so we can compromise and change it. And I hope that continues to happen. And Eugene is tough for that, because I think that there's a lot of work being done to make sure that the equity and inclusion and all that stuff is important, and I really care about a lot of that stuff, but I want to make sure that all people can use their voice. And that's, how do we do that? Because it's so extreme. It is the different ways, the different extremes, some people, I mean, how do you do it? And I think our society sometimes will, decide for itself. We'll see. I'm scared about the future.
I am too, but we got to make opportunities. It's interesting. My son, he did the IHS program, right, which is like the International High School.
It's
pretty
tough.
Intense. It's an intense program.
Yeah,
it's not meant for everybody, but it's interesting because like that's an international curriculum that's used all over the world. But in it, like from day one in IHS, it's like we are going to have difficult conversations. There's not always going to be an agreement or resolution. And we're, and they talk about stuff like there's a class that they take called Values and Beliefs that studies, like world religions, but also like differences in political, like what is capitalism versus socialism versus authoritarianism.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, it was set up from an early stage on that like you are going to respect each other. Each person gets their turn to talk. You're not going to belittle people because you don't agree. But also like you don't leave this classroom and blab like so-and-so's a total, because they're like, you're all having a discussion. You're learning. You won't learn anything if you shut it off, and so like.
I think it takes a lot of courage. Not to interrupt you, but I just think that we need to remember that it takes a lot of courage to speak up against a lot of overpowering voices, period, wherever that's coming from. So for somebody that's I'm just gonna say, I mean, it doesn't matter which extreme or which angle somebody comes at, everybody needs to feel like they're heard somehow.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the difficult challenge, because it's like, just because I might disagree on an issue, the reality is like, I care about every single person as an individual with rights. And so that's the challenge, is that, and I think that I believe that we're gonna, there's, in humanity, that's a bigger conversation than an hour, I do have optimism for that. But as far as it goes with the school, you're going to be limited because of budget and all that kind of stuff, like we talked about. So now, what would you like to add before we get out of here? I mean, what's if somebody wants to hear more about your campaign, they can go to your website. What's your website?
Yeah, it's www.thessen4j.com. And I mean, I'm a pretty humble person. I know some people are like, oh, do you have further political aspirations? I'm like, oh, hell no. Like, this is it.
Do you think that you're going to be able to find bigger sunglasses? Like, do you think that you'll buy bigger ones? Because I think that if you could, I'll keep an eye out and see if I can.
I know, it was so funny. When I got these, my son was like, who is that guy, British feather boas? I'm like, Elton John.
Elton John?
Like, yeah. And I'm like, yeah. So these are the Elton John glasses.
I feel comfortable saying that, just because, poking fun, because I know that you have some pretty good sunglasses game. And yeah, you're a fan of that, and I think that's pretty rad. And that, and well, that's cool. It's really good to meet you for the first time. We have so much we can talk about, and hopefully we do get to talk more on different things. I don't know. I want to talk real quick before we get out of here about stamina, and about how it's really difficult for so many different people that are going in so many different directions. And this really is apparent in schools, is that we need to just have a little bit of grace for each other. And I just want to hear your thoughts on this, because I think it's important to understand that there's so many people that are struggling with a lack of stamina, meaning that they don't have the energy to do anything. Just in general. And I know that that's true for me many times, where I'm like, I don't really want to go in public. I don't want to be involved with this. And then there's social expectations. Like, obviously, when a student is in school, they have to make sure to get good grades and continue with stuff. So how do you deal with that? Because I'm sure that that's something that comes up a lot. Or what is something else that you would like to add that comes up a lot between parents and teachers? You talk about the kids saying that they feel like criminals. I know that it's a lack of interest in being involved. How do we get kids to want to be involved?
We got to figure out what engages them. I mean, one of the things that's hard too is they keep talking about, oh, behavior problems are so much worse since COVID and blah, 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 blah. And it's like, okay, and then everybody's like, we need to ban cell phones. We need to punish those kids more, and like, fuck them kids, kind of fuck their feelings stuff. And it's like, at the end of the day, we have to remember that behavior is generally an expression of an unmet need. So like, I mean, this happens at the hospital sometimes. Like, I got patients that are cursing you up one side down the other. They're throwing stuff. And you're like, man, hold up, settle down. Like, what do you need right now so that like this can be easier, and then like the patient will tell you like, it's just nobody's listening to me. Okay, I'm literally listening to you right now. What do you need? And it's the same thing with the kids. And it's hard because what you need is regulated adults. But when the adults are short-staffed and doing 1,000 things, how can you have regulated adults that need to help co-regulate with a kid who's feeling really dysregulated,
Multiple
and
kids.
It's like,
sure.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it's like, how do you do that? But I think, because a lot of times they're like, that kid's having bad behavior. That kid's bad. No. The kid isn't bad. Their behavior is telling you something, and you got to figure out what that is, and you got to get to the bottom of it. And I think that's one more of those times where we can kind of get through the division, and everybody hollering about stuff, and be like, you guys, it's about the kids. So what do we need to do to support these kids better? I mean, there are some things I'm worried about, like, like we used to have hoots in the schools, got severely cut.
What is that? You said hoots?
Yeah, hoots is like a division of cahoots, and it's helping out our teens in schools. So it's kind of based off the Hoots model. But, we lost most of the funding for that going into this school year, and we more than likely aren't going to have any Hoots in the school at all. So like, they're kind of like crisis intervention sort of stuff. So it's like things like that, of how can we partner them with community partners to make sure that we're getting more mental health help in the schools? How can we make sure we have enough EAs? Like, we have behavioral support, educational assistants that go in and help teachers in classrooms. Like, we don't need to be cutting those positions. We need those people in the schools to help support these kids, to help support the teachers, so that we're not labeling second graders as bad kids, that
Sure, right.
we're meeting their needs, but yeah, it is hard. It's a time of division, and stamina is rough. I mean, I'm a single mom who works 4 to 5 days a week. And on any given week, depending on what's going on during the school year, I mean, I may have 2 to 4 meetings. So like on Wednesdays when we have board meetings, I will leave for work at, 7:45 in the morning, and I don't get home that night till 10:30 at night. I got to
Right.
Grubhub food or have leftovers for my
Right.
teenagers. Although enjoyingly now one of my teenagers is the student rep for her high school, so she's at my meetings.
Oh, that's
But
cool.
yeah, I know when she told me she wanted to do it, I was like, oh my God, do you not get enough of this for me at home?
Sure.
But
Now,
yeah.
so what do you think about maybe lowering the voting age on school board elections to 16? I know Devin Lawson is a candidate in the LCC board. Is that something that you would be, at least willing to look into and look at the
Oh
data
yeah,
and that kind of stuff? Yeah,
for
yeah.
sure. Oh yeah,
I think so too. I
absolutely.
think it's a great place to start. I don't really know if I believe in like lowering the voting age for everything to 16, but I think that the school board's a good place to start, and I just really think the civic involvement is important. And
Yeah.
when you're talking about schools, I think we should be listening to kids more. I want to give,
Oh yeah.
one little story that when I was a kid, I just always remember it. It's my grandma that the school violence stuff was kind of new. The epidemic
Yeah.
of school violence was pretty new. And I remember her saying, "Oh, at the Catholic school that your cousins go to, they just lock all the doors and don't let everyone out." And I'm like, "Well, I mean, I want to leave, so I don't know,
Right.
like if they're, I mean, that's kind of all I want to do is leave." And she's like, "What would you know?" And I'm like, "I mean, I'm in high school, so I think I know a little, like at the time." And
Yeah.
it was always so difficult for me to like just be just that with the way that they would look at it. What
Yeah.
would you know about this? And I still sometimes
Right.
feel that like I don't care. It doesn't matter. Everyone has a right to be heard. That's the way I look at it. So shout out to my
Yeah.
grandma, by the way, for that fun story. She's rest in peace. Anyways, she was an awesome woman, but that was a very fun one. It was just it was tough because I don't think that she understood the magnitude of what we were about to see in our country. And
Right.
in her defense, because she's like, whatever, just they lock the doors and it's fine. And so in her defense, it wasn't a reality that we now see,
Right.
because she hasn't lived, she didn't live long enough to see like where we're at today, where it's like gun violence is basically a reality the second that you leave about any shower, realistically,
Hmm.
just in general. Like if you if you were taking a shower or getting ready and you leave that, you are now in danger in America. Like
Absolutely.
maybe in the shower actually. So just in
Literally.
general, no, I mean anywhere you go. So
Yeah.
it's pretty scary. On that note, thank you so much. It's nice meeting you, Ericka Thessen,
Yeah, you too.
candidate for the school board in 4J. And I look forward to working with you more in the future on different things.
Awesome.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you, Patty.
You're welcome.